Chapter 11 concludes the long review of Israel's history which began in chapter 9. There is much in this chapter which is familiar. It emphasizes the great deeds which the Lord accomplished, which you have seen, but your children have not. In verse 2, these are also described as the discipline of the Lord, and include not only the judgment on Egypt, but also on the rebels within Israel. The metaphor outstretched arm was used in Egyptian literature of the extent of the authority of the pharaohs. Verses 10 and 11 compare the promised land with that of Egypt, but it is not clear what is intended. Farming was done in Egypt by irrigation, though the meaning of the phrase watering by foot is unknown. The promised land, however, did not need the annual flooding of the Nile and irrigation technology for its water, as it rained there, and presumably there were springs in the hills. This is the obvious point of comparison, but the irrigation was not considered an inferior method for farming. Perhaps there is some implication about the purity or quality of the water. It is, as verse 12 puts it, a land which the Lord looks after, whose eyes are always on it. So it is in some ways superior and blessed. Time and time again it is repeated that living in the Lord's ways is essential for the fruitfulness of the land. It is the main medium for God's expression of pleasure or anger, as verses 13 to 17 show. The centrality of the land to Israelite thinking is of course now quite different for Christians, who have themselves become temples of the Holy Spirit, and who have been sent out to the ends of the earth to make disciples. Chapter 12 reinforces the issue of the importance of place, with instructions on worship. Despite the broad connection of theme, Chapter 12 marks a new section and introduces the central section of Deuteronomy, which continues up to chapter 28. The opening words, "These are the statutes and ordinances that you must diligently observe," indicate the start of this legal material. Dispossessing the inhabitants of the land west of the Jordan also entails blotting out their gods, for they are the reason these inhabitants have come to be judged, and they must not ensnare the Israelite heart. As can be seen here from this list in verse 2, mountains and trees were to the ancient mind sacred places with particular potential for encountering or contacting a deity. Even God accommodates to this worldview, as he also grants special revelation on mountaintops. It is no coincidence either that in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus delivers the law from a mountain. He also feeds the multitudes, is transfigured, and finally is worshipped on various mountains. But although God can reveal himself in any way he likes, chapter 12 emphasizes that he will choose a certain place, which is not identified here, in the land that they are about to enter, and that the Israelites are to bring their sacrifices to it. A distinction is made between secular meat, which can be slaughtered and eaten at home, and meat intended as an offering, which must be brought to the chosen sanctuary. This applies likewise to tithes and festivals. Verses 13 to 14 warn not to burn offerings at any holy place one might come across. If you wandered through the ancient world, you would constantly come across such places. We have already repeatedly seen the special oak tree of Moreh near Shechem, which Abraham sees in chapter 12, in Genesis 12, and Jacob buries the foreign gods under in chapter 35. We'll meet it again in Joshua and Judges. The temptations then are everywhere, and Israel's mind must be trained over the generations to focus on the one place of the one God. Despite this focus, it will still be some time before the worship of God is entirely located at the temple, as we shall see. Even after it is built by Solomon, there are indications that shrines still operated in Israel for quite a while. More critical, though, as Jesus would later point out to the Samaritan woman in John 4, was who was worshipped, not necessarily where. Having said that, Deuteronomy 12 still sees the issue as vital for the Israelites as they enter this next phase of their nationhood, because nothing can be allowed to draw their heart away from the God who chose them and brought them out of Egypt.